In Chapter 24, we're going to look at nutrients, metabolism, and energy balance. In the previous chapter, we just looked at the digestive system, which we use to extract energy from the food that we eat. And now we're going to take a look at what happens once these nutrient molecules enter the bloodstream. And to define the term, nutrients are things that we need in order to sustain the properties of life. They're substances that we're going to take in from the food that we eat. And broadly speaking, we can think of nutrients in two different classes. Macronutrients that we need a lot of, carbs, lipids, and proteins. Lipids being fats and oils, of course. And then there is your micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. These are the things that we also need in order to sustain life, but we need them in much smaller quantities. Any of these nutrients, macro or micro, that we need that our body cannot produce will be considered essential nutrients. We have to get these from our diet. Some nutrients, on the other hand, the body is capable of making more of if we have inadequate amounts. Those would be considered non-essential nutrients, and essentially that is the job of the liver, among other things. So some of the nutrient molecules that we take in the diet are going to be used to make cellular structures and to build larger molecules, but much of what we eat is going to be converted into chemical energy. And we measure energy in calories when we're talking about nutrition. And a calorie is defined simply as the amount of heat energy that it requires that is required to raise the temperature of 1 gram. This should read gram, not a kilogram. Calorie, 1 calorie is the amount of heat energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Now our dietary calories, the things that you would see listed on your nutritional labeling on food packaging, it's actually not a calorie with a lowercase c, it's a kilocalorie, 1,000 calories, and that would have an uppercase C. So the calories that you have listed on your nutritional information is actually 1,000 calories. So if something has 100 calories in that food item, it's actually 100,000 calories. Now it's recommended that we take in our nutrients in certain proportions to maintain a healthy lifestyle. The food groups that we're supposed to be sampling from include, of course, your fruits and vegetables, the grains, proteins, and dairy. This figure represents something that the USDA, Department of Agriculture, thinks that we should be eating. Our diet should be based on these proportions, where much of our calories are coming from whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and then, of course, dairy and protein make up a substantial portion of our diet as well. This is more or less the recommended form your diet should take, according to the USDA. And these basic food groups shown here are going to provide the carbohydrates, the lipids, and the proteins that our bodies require. When it comes to carbohydrates, most of our dietary sources for carbs are going to be plant-based. A lot of starches. So your rice, your potatoes, your breads and pastas, etc. have a lot of starches. And this is a complex carbohydrate made of a bunch of individual glucose units. And then there are also simple sugars, mono and disaccharides like glucose, fructose, sucrose, etc. that we get from fruits, dairy products, etc. And much of the plant material that we take in our diet would be in the form of fiber. Fiber is plant material that is not completely digested as it goes through the gut. Much of this has to do with the cellulose in plant cell walls. We don't have the enzymes in our gut to digest these, to digest cellulose, I should say. So insoluble fiber just passes on through the gut, and that's considered roughage. Much of the carbohydrates that we eat are going to be converted to glucose, simple sugar that's going to get used by the cells to make lots of ATP. Remember, ATP is the energy currency of the cell. ATP is going to be used to drive enzymatic reactions. So we use the glucose that we take in to make that ATP. Any excess glucose will get stored away in the form of glycogen or converted into fat and gets stored then until we need to produce more ATP. It's recommended that most of our diet come from carbohydrates, particularly the complex carbohydrate types that you would get in your whole grains and vegetables. The typical American diet doesn't really get a lot of complex carbohydrates from whole grains and vegetables. Most of us are getting our carbs from processed grains, rice, pasta, bread, cereals, etc. When it comes to lipids, our primary dietary source of lipids is going to be triglycerides. So things that we find from both plants and animal sources, where your animal sources are going to have more saturated fats, your plant sources tend to have more unsaturated fats. And triglyceride is considered a neutral fat because it's got 3 fatty acids. That's where the tri comes from. 3 fatty acids attached to a glycerol molecule. So this is the form that we would take it in our diet, and then we would break off the fatty acids, whether they're saturated or unsaturated, and use those in the body as needed. We can convert some of those fatty acids into other ones that we need. But essential fatty acids, like linoleic and linolenic acids, you may have heard of those. You have a lot of those in olive oil, for instance. These are essential fatty acids because the liver cannot produce those. We also take in a lot of cholesterol unless we're eating a vegan diet. Plants don't have cholesterol. But if you are eating dairy or meat or anything of that nature, then you are getting cholesterol through your diet. So we also make the cholesterol we need, regardless of whether we get it in our diet or not. We produce it in our liver. And it's critical for proper functioning of the plasma membrane. So in addition to being used for fuel storage, insulation, protecting vital organs, etc., lipids are going to be used in the body for many other roles. Remember, phospholipids are integral parts of the cell membrane, also make up the myelin sheath and neurons. Cholesterol, as I said, is important for the stability of the plasma membrane. It gets used for bile salts and steroid hormones. It's the precursor for those. Prostaglandins, which come from fatty acids, those are going to be used for inflammation. So there are many different uses for the fats that we get in our diet. And the reason we use fat as a fuel storage, and our bodies evolved many years ago to do so, is because it's cheaper pound per pound to carry around fuel in the form of fat than it is to carry it around in the form of protein or carbohydrates. We get more calories per kilogram of fat than we do from protein or carbs. And so it's recommended that our dietary intake of lipids would be about 30% or less of what we eat, with saturated fats making up a small portion of that. So red meats have a lot of saturated fats. Plants don't. Plants have a lot of unsaturated fats. And cholesterol, we're recommending to get about 1.5 eggs worth of cholesterol per day. So too much fat intake, of course, is associated with obesity, cardiovascular disease, especially the saturated fats that you get from red meats. The third form of macromolecule in our diet is protein. Remember that proteins are made up of amino acids. They get strung together like beads on a chain, and when we digest proteins, we have to break the proteins down into their individual amino acid units, and then we absorb those, and we use those amino acids to produce the proteins that our body needs. So dietary sources of protein that have all the amino acids that we need are considered complete proteins. there are a certain number of amino acids that are considered essential. That is to say that we can't make them in our own body. There's a total of 20 amino acids that go into protein in the human body. 8 of those 20 are considered essential in adults, which means that we can't make them. We have to get them from our diet. So any protein source that doesn't have all 8 of those essential amino acids would be considered an incomplete protein source. So our plant-based protein sources generally tend to be incomplete, and the meat-based protein sources are complete. So a person on a plant-based diet would have to combine the incomplete proteins in order to get the complete set of essential amino acids that we need. These 8 here, tryptophan, methionine, valine, etc., these represent the 8 essential amino acids that the body can't make. There are 12 others that the body can make, and so those are considered non-essential. So any food that would have all 8 of these would be considered a complete protein. Plants are not complete. They are incomplete protein sources because they don't have all 8 of these. So in order to make up for that deficiency, one can combine different plant sources to make sure that you get all 8 of those essentials. So remember, the amino acids that we take in are going to be used to produce proteins, and those proteins then are going to be used to either perform structural roles or functional roles. Both are very important. Remember that functional proteins act as enzymes or signaling molecules. Structural proteins can be found in the skin and connective tissue, muscle, actin and myosin, etc. But whether amino acids are going to be used to produce protein or get converted into energy depends on several factors. First of all, at the time that we're trying to make the protein, we have to have all the amino acids that are going to get used in that protein on hand, or we're not going to make the protein. You either have the materials and you're ready to go, or you're not. And if not, then those amino acids are going to get used for energy. Instead, they're going to get converted ultimately into glucose. Also, when the body is deprived of its preferred fuel sources, carbs or fat, it's going to begin to break down proteins and convert those amino acids to glucose to use for fuel. Also, hormones are going to control whether we're using amino acids to make protein or using them for energy. Growth hormones, testosterone, so-called anabolic hormones, they're leading to protein synthesis, not towards energy use. But then there are other hormones like cortisol, glucocorticoid, stress hormone, and it's going to promote the conversion of the amino acids to glucose instead of making proteins. So it all depends on what the body needs and what its goals are at that moment as to whether the amino acids that we're taking in are going to get used to make protein or get used for energy instead. Again, protein would be the body's third choice for fuel. We're going to use glucose first. When we run out of glucose, we'll convert glycogen into glucose. And then after we've used up our glycogen, we're going to move on to the fat stores. Then, only after we've gone through carbs and fats are we going to turn to our proteins. So a person whose rate of protein synthesis exactly equals the rate of protein breakdown is in what's known as nitrogen balance. And we talk about nitrogen balance because proteins have a lot of nitrogen. Carbohydrates and lipids, not so much. Somebody who's putting together more protein than they're breaking down is in what's known as positive nitrogen balance. So growing children, women who are pregnant, etc. These are people who would be in positive nitrogen balance. And then, of course, somebody who's got more breakdown of protein than they do synthesis would be in negative nitrogen balance. They're producing more nitrogen that they're going to have to excrete in the urine. And this could be because of, say, burns, infection, disease, etc. So the nitrogen balance, as well as age, a person's size, their level of activity, these are all things that are going to affect a person's dietary requirements for protein. In general, the USDA recommends 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And to determine how much protein you should be taking in, then you would simply take your weight in pounds divided by 2.2 to get kilograms, and then multiply that by 0.8. So I'm 165 pounds. That puts me at about 75 kilograms, and that is 60 grams of protein that I should be taking per day. The average Western diet, you get a lot more protein than you actually require. Somebody who's working out, a bodybuilder, weightlifter, would probably be taking in a lot more protein. Vitamins and minerals make up the micronutrients, things that are required in pretty minute amounts. They're not going to be used for energy. They're required for other processes in order to maintain good health in the body. So vitamins are organic compounds, so they have carbon and hydrogen, and minerals are inorganic compounds. They don't have carbon. A lot of vitamins are going to act as coenzymes, which means that they help, in fact they are required for the proper functioning of a particular enzyme. So that enzyme that requires a vitamin as a coenzyme won't be able to catalyze the reaction that it's responsible for unless that coenzyme is present. Vitamin C is a good example. It's a coenzyme required for the proper synthesis of collagen, among other things. Most vitamins are going to get absorbed from the diet. Vitamin D is an exception. It's made in the skin. Vitamin K is made by bacterial flora in the intestines. Vitamin A is derived from beta-carotene, but most of them are going to come from the diet directly. And there are water-soluble vitamins and there are fat-soluble vitamins. The B vitamins and vitamin C are water-soluble. So they don't get stored in the body. Anything that we don't need is going to get excreted in the urine. Fat-soluble vitamins, there's only 4 of them, A, D, E, and K. And any excess of the fat-soluble vitamins will get stored in the adipose tissue of the body, except for vitamin K. Some vitamins, vitamin C, E, and A, for instance, in addition to maybe acting as coenzymes, are also capable of acting as so-called antioxidants. Antioxidants are things that are able to absorb and neutralize free radicals. And free radicals are simply compounds that have an unpaired electron. So you can kind of think of free radicals as an unpaired electron. And those unpaired electrons are able to kind of bounce around from molecule to molecule inside the cell, potentially damaging things like DNA or lipids in the plasma membrane. Free radicals are produced as a normal byproduct of many cellular metabolic reactions. So just normal, everyday cellular chemistry will produce free radicals. And that's thought to be one of the potential ways that cells age over time, is with the accumulated damage of free radicals. So vitamins that act as antioxidants are thought to help extend life by potentially absorbing these free radicals. This table from your textbook shows the water-soluble vitamins, B vitamins and vitamin C, and it shows their dietary sources, functions in the body, and symptoms of deficiency, or in pink, symptoms of excess. Notice that some vitamins, like vitamin C, are found basically in plant sources. Some are found in dairy and meats as well as plants. Many vitamins listed here are going to be coenzymes. Like vitamin C, for instance, required for collagen synthesis. It also acts as an antioxidant. And then your B12, required for nucleic acid metabolism and forming red blood cells. And then this table shows the fat-soluble vitamins. There's only 4, vitamin A, D, E, and K. And as well as their sources and functions, deficiencies, excesses. And minerals are micronutrients that are inorganic. They don't have carbon in them. And again, micronutrients are not required for energy. They're required for other purposes in the body. Of the many minerals that we require in some amounts, 7 are required in moderate amounts, like 200 milligrams a day or more. And they're listed here: calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, chlorine, potassium, sulfur, and sodium. And other minerals are required in much smaller amounts. And there are many varied uses for these minerals. Some are going to be used, of course, to make bone. Iron is used to carry around oxygen in the bloodstream. Iodine is a required part of thyroid hormone. And some are going to be used as electrolytes. And these two tables here summarize the different minerals, their sources, functions, and efficiency symptoms.